Welcome back to Emarites 24/7. This evening on the show, it's all about the Dubai Duty-Free Tennis Championships, the annual event that continues to attract the biggest and the best on the court. This week, Roger Federer will look to win a record 5 titles at the championships, while current world #1 Novak Djokovic hopes to tie Federer's record of 4. So why do we attract so many top international players? 7 of the top 10 in the women's and 8 of the top 10 in the men's, but not have an Arab player of our own. Well, joining us this evening to answer that very question is Reem Abulleil, a sports reporter who specialises in tennis for Sport 360. Welcome to the show this evening.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I wanted to begin by talking about the fact we do see so many big international names here. As I just mentioned, 8 of the top 10 in the men's draw. Certainly some great names there. What is it about Dubai that keeps attracting these players back?
Well, we were just talking to Andy Murray yesterday about this, and he was saying that this is a very unique tournament for him and for most of the players. They find that they get to stay in lavish hotels. They get to do some cool things off the court, like visiting. Murray played football at the top of Burj Khalifa the other day. Federer did that amazing stunt video years ago with Andre Agassi on the helipad of Burj Al Arab Hotel. So these kind of things make the tournament very special for them. But the tournament also tennis-wise, it is very smartly placed in the calendar. Besides that the city is very attractive and hospitality is amazing, they always talk about the hospitality, they also say that the next tournaments that they have, they go to Miami and Indian Wells and then Miami, and these are very big tournaments for them. They're ATP 1000 tournaments, and this is the perfect place for them to prepare for that. Similar weather conditions, the surface is a little bit similar, so for them to have 8 of the top 10 players, like you said, all of them in the same place, weeks, almost a week before going to the States and competing against those same players, it's just the perfect scenario for them.
Not a bad gig, is it?
Yeah.
We have seen quite a lack of representation of Arab players here across the Middle East. Why do you think that is? Why haven't we seen more of our local players out there?
It's true. This week there is a local Emirati, Omar Bahrouzian. He has a wild card and he is playing. However, it's true, there is a lack. Right now, there are only 2 Arabs in the top 500. One of them is actually breaking through quite nicely. He's 28 years old, so you wouldn't necessarily say he's coming up from the juniors. He's almost 100 in the world right now. There is an Egyptian who's like 400 in the world. However, there aren't the numbers that you get from Spain, for example, and countries like that. The problem is the system that exists right now in most federations in the Arab countries, it doesn't necessarily cultivate talent. You need grassroots initiatives in a way that aren't really in place, and at the same time, a completely different thing to address is the existing players that are trying to break through, they're not getting the necessary support. And I'm not just talking money. Money is a big factor because the sponsorship mentality for individual sports in the Middle East is not really quite there. You find football teams that have amazing sponsorships, but it's very rare that you can find a tennis player who has good, proper sponsorship. So that is a problem. But besides the money, you need to host a lot of events that these players can actually compete in. For example, the tournament that's happening right now, it's a very big tournament. You have amazing players. If you give a wild card to your local player, that's amazing, an amazing opportunity for him. But this is not necessarily what he needs because he cannot necessarily win his matches. He can go and play and get an awesome experience, but at the end of the day, he's going to lose probably 6-1, 6-2, and that's it. But if you start hosting the kinds of tournaments where the local players, especially in the Middle East, because they can compete at a relatively close level. So if you start hosting a lot of futures events, futures are, let's say it's like the minor leagues, it's the lower tour, it's less than the ATP. And then there's the Challenger Tour, which is in between. Once you start hosting these kind of tournaments and give your local players as much wildcards and as much opportunities as possible, then that can actually help them. Because a player at the end of the day, no matter how much he practices, he needs to compete. And you need to give these kind of opportunities. Another thing is that we don't have the mentality where being a professional athlete can really be your profession. Parents are very reluctant to allow their children at the age of 15 and 16, which is very critical in a sport like tennis. They're very reluctant to let their players just stop going to school or postpone university or even high school. Some players don't even go to high school and then they finish it later. And parents are reluctant to let their kids do that. But then again, for tennis, it's essential. You need to be traveling, you need to be doing tennis camps abroad, you need to be going to tournaments, and you need to be dedicated. It's important. So once people here start understanding that it can be a profession and it's okay, and you can always finish studying later, because a tennis player stops playing almost when he's 30 something. So people go to school, back to school all the time. So this is another thing, and that's why there are a lot of juniors that are really good, but once they start going to become senior players, they just disappear in the rankings.
Absolutely, got to get in there early, not old like us. Now, there has been some criticism about perhaps a lack of organisation for the national team. You mentioned Omar, though. He's been quite vocal about this. Do you see this changing at all at Emirates Tennis and across the region as a whole? Obviously, you're saying it's important that we start having more events like this. Are you seeing things beginning to improve? Could we be looking in the next generation, seeing some major up-and-coming Arab players?
I think it's possible. I can't say that it's impossible. And you can see, for example, that this year there were a couple of ITF tournaments for juniors. And there's actually a Syrian player who's about 13 years old. He's brilliant. His name is Karim. And everybody's talking about him. He's the #1 player in Asia right now. He resides in the UAE. And he played these ITFs over here. So he never got this chance before. He used to go and play in France, or he played in Iran earlier. But the fact that there was one ITF in Dubai and one ITF in Fujairah and one ITF in Abu Dhabi, these show that there is hope. Is it across the Middle East? I guess it is. I think in the other countries as well, there are more ITFs and things like that. But so many things need to fall into place in order to get a top player. It's not just one thing. So if a system is built, then there's hope.
Very true. Now, final question. Who do you think is going to be playing in the finals, going to head-to-head this week?
Well, obviously, the top 2 seeds are Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer, and they played in the final last year. So everybody's actually hoping that they will be in the final again, because they gave us an amazing final. So they're playing really well, obviously. Novak hasn't been defeated yet this year. Federer just won Rotterdam a couple of weeks ago. So most likely it can be those 2 players. However, a player like Andy Murray, he's in the same half of the draw with Novak Djokovic. He could possibly meet him in the semis. And should they meet, then he has a chance of actually stopping Novak as well.
Absolutely.
So, but between these 3 players, I don't think not many other players.
I think it's going to be a good match. Looking forward to a huge week of tennis. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And of course, you can catch all the action right here on Dubai Sports. Don't miss it. Now, before we go, let's take a look at tomorrow's news today. The front page stories you'll be waking up to on Tuesday morning. Gulf News reports on Syria, with the opposition claiming a looming massacre as referendum votes are counted. The National reports that Indian and Pakistani schools in Dubai are performing dismally in the area of special needs education. 7 Days reports on tickets for Madonna's Abu Dhabi gig selling out within 1 hour. And the Khalij Times reports that a suicide car bomber killed at least 9 people in an attack on a military airport in eastern Afghanistan on Monday. Well, that's all we have time for on this evening's show, but join us again on Tuesday night. We'll find out why the UAE needs more competition in the telecoms market before the sector can move forward. But for now, from all of the team here at Emirates 24/7, it's goodbye.